All right. We are live. I fixed a couple of issues on my end for the mic and for video, and I hope it works, but there's always room for improvement. So let's go ahead and get started. All right. With about a week or so left for everybody to start their semesters, I figured this would be a good one to cover here. Supercharge your semester. How to make the best out of your 4 months. So what I want to do is stay away from all the cliched stuff that you've already heard about, such as, do this and do that and be smart and pay attention. And that stuff goes in one ear and goes out the other. It's not really something that sticks, does it? So I figured we'd do something that first describes the path of 80% of the students, no matter how smart you are or how great of a university you study. And this is typically the path of 80% of the students, which is the wrong path. Once we discuss that, then we'll go over and talk about what you should be doing. So I'm not going to focus on cliched stuff, and I'm not going to do a boring start to finish. I'm just going to go with what 80% of the students do and what you shouldn't do. And then there will be lessons throughout, okay? You might actually identify with some of this stuff. If you're 80% of the population, then you will. If you're the top 20%, then you probably are thinking, well, I do better than that. In the case of which, that's really good. We want you there. We want you in the top 20%. So, what's the worst possible way for you to spend your semester in 2-month cycles? The worst possible way to spend a semester is, it's done in 5 steps. It's actually quite interesting how you naturally break it down and you repeat the cycle. It doesn't matter how many times you do it anyway. So first thing you do is anticipate. Then you cope, and you panic, then you fail, and then you reset. Each of these stages are quite interesting, and I'm going to go over each of these. This is what everybody does, 80%, and this is what you're not supposed to do. But I have to go over this because you might think you don't do this, but you might do this in some capacity, okay? So the first is anticipate. This is the honeymoon period. This is when you start your semester with high hopes and big dreams, maybe a tad bit of sadness because you left home if you're studying at a university with a hostel. You think you have a lot of time, so you spend the first 2 weeks just catching up with friends. You haven't seen them for a while. So you're going to watch movies, you're going to hang out with friends, you're going to be PC gaming, which is quite typical of guys. And you're just going to tell yourself you're getting into the gist of things and, it's okay, it's easy. Because classes are easy, which means you doze off in class. So you're not really present. Maybe you miss a few classes because you're up late at night doing nothing important, but you were up late at night anyway. And you think it's all right. So you get the breakdown in class of what's going to constitute an A grade. What I mean by this is the breakdown of percentages. It's how much your quizzes will weigh towards your A grade, how much your assignments will, how much your midterms and finals will. And you do this whole math in your head and on a paper, and you tell yourself, yeah, that's no problem, I got it. Okay? This is the honeymoon period where everything's good. Then you move on to the coping period. This is when you start getting assignments and quizzes. It is tuned up just a little bit. You wing the quizzes based on crash courses that you receive in 30 minutes from the smartest kid who's around you. You do reasonably all right. You copy the assignments off of the one guy who completed it first. Classes start getting a little bit complex, so you try to be present, but confused with what's going on. You tell yourself, this is weird. I need to go back on the previous lectures. So you tell yourself you'll go back, study with a friend who will explain everything to you. No problem. You always have this one guy who gives us crash courses, right? Yes, we do. Then student events start coming up. All your friends are going, and you have fear of missing out. So you go as well. even though you're not having fun necessarily. You're just standing around doing nothing. Then you get a couple more quizzes, a couple more assignments. The quizzes are winged. By that I mean you just take a 30-minute crash course and you do whatever you can. The assignments are copied. Then you start getting results, and they're not as good as you hoped for. So you start calculating. Again, you go back to the drawing board. Okay, I've lost 10%, which means I have 90% of the grade still remaining in assignments, quizzes, and midterms, which means if I score 100% in the midterm, I could still score an A grade. So this is coping. You see what I mean now? This is coping. So you tell yourself you'll do great. You tell yourself it's still okay, nothing's lost. And then you feel pretty good about yourself. So you place yourself on your seat to study, but you daydream. You pointlessly scroll on your phone, something that I even do at my age. But again, this is the coping part, right? So you tell yourself, well, not all is lost. I can still do a pretty good job. I'm smarter than everyone else. So of course I don't have to work as hard. So I can actually do the same thing that, so-and-so nerd is doing in 3 hours. I can do the same thing in 30 minutes just because I'm a very smart guy. If I applied myself, I'd be really good, but I'm just very smart, so I don't have to do it as much as they do. Come on, we've all been there. Okay? This is called self-delusion, but anyway, this is a coping phase. And then misery loves company. So you're gonna place yourself with your friends unintentionally, but it will happen. You will place yourself with groups and friends who are in the exact same shoes as you, exact same boat. And so you won't feel bad. You tell yourself, hey, and how are you doing on the assignment? Oh, I sucked. I didn't get a good. Yeah, me too, but it's all right. We're all, 5 other guys near me. We all have the same results. So it shouldn't be that bad, right? Because you're hanging in the circles that are doing exactly what you're doing, which is making mistakes. This is your coping period. Before you know it, exams are closing in, quizzes are getting tougher, and assignments don't make sense. This is the panic period. You're basically out of time. You stress out, and as a result of you stressing out, instead of you sitting down to study, because that's a lot of hard work, you go and socialize with friends, again, who are in a similar position. Talk about everything that's wrong with the system, everything that's the fault of everybody else except you. So you vent, feel a little bit better, and as a result, you procrastinate even harder. Then you go around looking for crash courses the night before the exam. On the day of the exam, you tell yourself you studied hard because you studied one whole night. Which we obviously know that doesn't work. So by now you're underslept, you're underprepared, you're overwhelmed, and you tell yourself you worked hard because you studied the entirety of one night. So not only are you in some kind of self-delusion right now, but you're in a bad spot. This is panic. Obviously, we know what happens next. Take your exam and score a pretty bad grade. Now, remember, this is a 2-month cycle, okay? So what's going to happen now is you're going to get a bad grade, pretty much lost the first 50% of your class grade, up until midterms. So you go back to the drawing board, you do the math, and you say, well, I have 50% of my grade left. What score do I have to get in order to pass the grade? So it went from, what do I need to score an A, to what do I need to score a B+? Yeah, I can still manage a B+, to eventually, what do I need to score in order to pass? I think it would be all right if I get a C+, minus. That's what it eventually comes down to. Anyway, you get a bad grade. Then you reset. This is the last phase. So you get a bad grade, you obviously fail. I don't mean getting an F grade necessarily, but failing your initial expectations. Then you go to the reset phase where you're just glad it's over. You don't have to think about it for a couple of days. Midterm break is here. And you have your excuses built in. Okay? Even before you got the results, you tell your friends and your family, it wasn't your fault. First big mistake. Teachers weren't good enough. Second big mistake. Then you tell yourself next time around, you're going to study from day one. You're going to be completely disciplined. You're going to disconnect yourself from all of society. You've got this. Third big mistake. This is a mistake because you cannot be unidirectional. You have to be balanced. And I'll cover more of this later. Long story short, what did you do? You're down 2 months and you basically went through the cycle of anticipate, okay, which is the honeymoon period. Then you went through the coping phase, which is, just heat turns up a little bit. Then the panic phase, then the failure, and then the reset. The reset is my favorite because that's where most of the self-delusion and lack of accountability happens. Okay. This is what everybody does. This is what you're not supposed to do. The reason I covered this is because I promise, unfortunately, that 80% of the people around you will follow this exact pattern. And when this happens, when they do that, and if you're watching this, or you've seen this video, you recognize this pattern, I want you to go to these guys and tell them, this is exactly what Ali predicted, and you're doing exactly that. Maybe you can still save them, all right? So what I'm going to go to next is what you should be doing. This is what the cycle should look like, not what the cycle typically is. Just going to check stream real quick. Looks like audio is fine. And all right, we are good. All right. Now, the main issues with this whole cycle of anticipate, cope, panic, fall, and reset. Number one, you don't take accountability. That's problem number one. Number two, you pretend that you can do better by being very singular focused and unidirectional, aka I'll do nothing but study. I'll do great. Problem is that this is not a sustainable model. It's not practical. It's not sustainable. It's emotional at best. You're acting on emotions. You're reacting. And emotions change all the time. So if you think you're going to do amazing next time because you're going to do nothing but study, that's not going to happen. You have to be balanced about things. So what you need is mental presence, balance, and persistence. Remember the persistence part. That's very important. Your cycle should not be anticipate, cope, panic, fall, and reset. Your cycle should be plan, implement, observe, adjust, persist. Okay? Now I'm going to utilize Google Board here real quick. And probably when the stream goes public, I'll skip out on some of the parts where we're waiting, but I think I need to write this down. Actually, I won't utilize Google Board. I'll just write it down here. I need to write it down because visuals matter. So this is bad. Okay. Bad. I'm going to write down what the bad cycle is. Anticipate. Next one is cope. Then panic. Then you fail. Then last one is you reset. Bad. Don't do this. Okay. All right. I think I've said this enough times now already. I think this should have gotten through to you. All right. So here's what you should do. Plan, implement, observe, adjust, and persist. This is what you need to be doing. Plan. You all have a calendar. And you have a class schedule with a breakdown. So start on day one. What you put in early will give you the best return on investment as a delayed interest. I'm talking about the days when you have no assignments and no quizzes. That's when you need to be actually focused more on what the class is saying because it goes 0 to 60 very fast. You might not get the results right then and there, but this is a delayed ROI, return on investment. So start on day one, okay? Start your focus on day one. Remember, plan your month and then your week. You don't have to get too granular on a day-to-day basis. You don't have to be tyrannical against yourself, but you need to do the right thing. And here's the interesting thing is every time we're screwing up or we're about to screw up, there is the voice in our heads that goes, I don't know if I should be doing this, but we ignore the voice. You know what you need to do. You just ignore it. So just stop ignoring that voice. And remember, this is very important. For everyone who does not take self-accountability and blames other people and other issues for their... Nothing's perfect, okay? Nothing's perfect, and this is the test. Like, things were never meant to be perfect. There will be professors that may not, that the mode of communication doesn't make sense to you. Maybe you're not getting what they're saying. There will be events in your life that will come up that will distract you from work. A lot of that stuff will happen. But the system is not designed to fail you. It's actually designed to help you if you know what you're supposed to do. Okay? I'm going to say this again. The system, which is the semester system, quizzes and the assignments and keeping you busy, it's not designed to fail you. It's designed to help you if you do what you're supposed to do. It's quite simple. Let me explain it. What are you supposed to do? Assignments, quizzes. Those are the easy things. You'll come to class. If you came to class and you made the effort, maybe listen. Okay? So you have to carve out time in your schedule to ace the assignments. You have to give yourself a couple of weekends. And I'm going to go over this in more detail in the next phase, which is implement. But I'm still on planning, so I'm going to go over everything else you have to plan. You have to plan your schedule to ace the assignments and do them yourself. You have to give yourself a couple of weekends that you can to actually have fun and do something outside of just work and not being outside of your room. And your planning should stretch beyond studying. I covered this a little bit, but your planning needs to include off days, adventures, being physically fit, partaking in sports or physical activity, maybe extracurriculars, actually absolutely extracurriculars, and everything else. Planning should also include visiting home, relationships like your family, so on and so forth. Now, when you're done with planning, and this should happen in the first week, really, then you want to move to implementation. Now, the first thing about implementation is you need to be actively implementing your focus in the classroom, which means active learning and participation in the class. If you're listening to lectures and asking questions, it's likely that not only are you helping yourself, but maybe 50 other students, because the same question that you have in mind is probably the same question 50 other students have, but they're too shy to ask the question. Further, if you ask questions and you participate, and I don't mean just come up with random questions, but if you're listening to the lecture, trust me, you will have questions. You stay curious, you will have questions. And when you ask these questions, you will be put on the professor's radar in a good way, which will help you build that relationship. And what will that do? It will help you with recommendations. So you see, this is a very organic process. And if you haven't seen my video before of how to apply for graduate school, I recommend you look at that. But we covered recommendations. And the thing about recommendations is you don't just go up to a professor and say, I need a recommendation. You have to have some relationship. Otherwise, the teacher is going to say, well, who are you exactly? I've never heard of you, never seen you before. It doesn't work like that. So active listening and participation in classes is number one. Then you got to ace the assignments. Look, it's easy to copy assignments. All been there. Okay? It's kind of like an open secret. But what you do is, if you copy the assignments, you rid yourself of the opportunity to learn the concepts that you're supposed to in those assignments. The purpose of the assignments is to give you a nice, long, unlimited, almost unlimited time. I mean, sure, assignments have a limit, like 4 days, 3 days, 2 days. But what I mean by unlimited is if you're listening to class lectures and you're doing the assignment, you're not limited by a 30-minute on the clock as you are with a quiz or an exam. So, I mean, technically you have a lot of time for the assignments. You have many hours is what I mean. If you do the assignments yourself, you learn the concepts and you'll be set for quizzes. And then you'll only need an incremental more amount of effort to study for the quizzes. This is important. You think that you're saving time by, not doing the assignments, maybe copying them around. You're not really saving time at the end of the day, because if you do put in the time for the assignments, you'll only need an incremental amount of effort to do the quizzes, because the quizzes will cover some of the subject matter that was already covered in the assignments that you would have already done, and you would be comfortable with that. Then you ace the quizzes. When you ace the quizzes, then you're set for the midterms. So one thing builds upon the next. And if you miss one out, you're ridding yourself, you're losing the opportunity to do better in the next. You have to work twice as hard for the next step. So you start small, you work your way up, it actually works. All right, so now you've done implementation, right? Now we go to the observation phase. This is where you observe academic results. And the observation phase doesn't really happen at a specific time. It happens every time you get a result. It happens at the end of every week. And it is where you need to look at the results, review them, go back and adjust accordingly, which we'll discuss next. But observation, this phase includes observing your academic results, assignments, quizzes, exams, observing your mental health. How are you feeling? Is this sustainable? The routine you're in? Does something need to change? Observe your routine. How is it working for you? Are you building up hours of lack of sleep? Are you constantly exhausted? Rate yourself out of 10 in each of these domains. Academic results, assignments, quizzes, exams, mental health. Is this sustainable? How's your routine? Make yourself scribble on a notepad the different things that are worth observing. I've just mentioned a few. And then rate yourself out of 10. And then ask yourself, what do you need to do to get better? Okay? Remember, you cannot manage what you cannot measure. You cannot manage what you cannot measure. So you have to measure what's going on so that you can manage and adjust accordingly. Which brings us to our next subject, which is adjust. Whatever you wrote down on that little piece of paper, there is room for improvement. So write down next to those number scales that you just rated yourself, write down what you need to be doing better. Write down how. So write down the what, write down the how. Get a friend to do the same exercise with you so that you can get a third person's perspective. Critique each other in a healthy way. And then adjust your schedules. For example, if you're feeling too stressed and working too hard, plan a change of scenery. And what I mean by plan a change of scenery is it can apply even to studying. If you're studying in your room on that same desk for 2 months straight, maybe you need to go to the library. You need some group sessions. Maybe you need to change it up a bit. If you're bored of studying, get a group of friends. Okay, we've covered that. And meditate, reflect. If you pray, then this is already embedded in your discipline and your routine. But it is important. Reflection is important. All right. Next one is persist. So you've been through the cycle of planning, implementation, observation, adjustment. All you need to do now is persist. Keep doing what you're doing endlessly. Persistence is key. Now that you've adjusted based on your mistakes, let them go. Stop thinking about the one quiz that you missed. It's not going to help anything. You've been through the exercise. of observation and adjustment. Now the purpose of that bad memory of the bad quiz is gone. There is no purpose for that bad quiz. There's no point in sitting there thinking about how bad you did. If you've gone through the observation and the adjustment, that's the purpose of a bad memory, really. So once you've digested, broken it down, taken out your lessons from it, then let it go and move forward. Like I said, the purpose of the feeling that you get when you're not doing as well as you should have is to adjust and do better. It's not just to feel bad. Like if you feel bad, there's something that you need to address there. Unfortunately, what a lot of us do is we just hang on to the feelings of whatever negativity or failure. We don't translate it into a net positive. We don't translate it into an actionable item. We just stay there, letting it cripple us. That is not what you need to do. You need to change your relationship with the feeling of failure. Change your relationship with that feeling. That feeling isn't supposed to cripple you or get you down. That feeling is supposed to inspire you to analyze yourself, observe, and do something better next time. Deduce your results and what you need to do better. Do this forever. Seriously. Plan, implement, observe, adjust, and persist. Okay. We're getting close to the 30-minute mark, which means I'm on time. So I'm going to go over a few closing tips. And these are not in any specific order, but these are tips that focus on productivity, whether it's through being mentally aware, physically well, and reflection. So you have to be intentional with your time. Do not sleepwalk through life. And I say this in a lot of different domains, not just academics. You cannot sleepwalk through life. You cannot live in quiet desperation. I mean this. You have to be intentional with your time. Think of time as a currency. And I don't mean that you're always working or you're always studying. What I do mean is you're present with what you're doing. Make sure that what you're engaged in is what you intended to engage in. If you're out with your friends, make sure it was your idea to be out with your friends. If you're watching a movie, make sure you're enjoying that movie. If you're studying, make sure it's done with focus. Put your phone away. Don't fool yourself. Avoid pointless scrolling. Time is a currency, and you need to be intentional with it. You can't just spend it and make nothing out of it. Let go of your previous semesters. Start new. Stop worrying about what's lost. There's nothing you can do to change it. Start building out your resume. Day one. Imagine what it would look like at the end of the semester. Plan out your extracurriculars accordingly. Plan out your grades accordingly. Study smart and hard. People say, oh, study smart, not hard. Study smart and hard, because if you're studying smart and you're studying hard, you're doing better than the person who is only studying smart, and you're doing better than the person who's only studying hard. Do both. Also, be physically active. If you're between the age of 18 and 22, which would be the target audience for this video if you're an undergrad, there's no reason for you to be physically unfit. Literally none. 0 reasons for you to be physically unfit. Remain active, go to the gym, you'll feel good, it'll improve your focus, you will sleep better. If you don't want to go to the gym, play outdoor sports. If you don't want to do that, plug in your headphones and go for a walk. How hard is that? Remember the aspect of catching up with family that I mentioned before? Call someone that you want to talk to. Go for a walk. And get sleep. If you're consistently losing sleep, it's going to start adding up and affecting you. So if you're losing sleep, this note here. Yeah. If you're losing sleep, if you're actually losing sleep, it needs to be worth it. It needs to really be worth something, not just I lost sleep because I was chatting with friends about something completely. We've all been there. So if you are, I would say don't lose sleep, but if you are losing sleep, make sure that it was something very important, not something completely pointless. Last thing is mental. I mentioned before, get a change of scenery, change where you study occasionally, get a healthy mix of being in focused study sessions versus group sessions. Take weekends where you are not on campus and have fun, enjoy life, but deserve it first and then desire. Deserve and then desire. And yeah, most importantly, subscribe to this channel because there is a lot of good content coming up still your way. Throughout the next 2-3 months, I will be doing these live sessions. Okay, so I think today will be a quick one. Just gonna check real quick to see if anything's going on. I need to address in the chat window. Nope, I think we are good. So this will be a short one. I know a lot of the students are currently on their way to going to university, and I don't believe I'm gonna do questions today. I have answered all the questions that I received on email, and if you have any other suggestions on topics, please feel free to write to me. Good luck, and I'll see you next Sunday.